Yo, what's going on, family? Hoping I can keep this particular video as short as possible, though there is so much to say, regarding this person and what this person meant to me in my life. A few days ago, I believe it was September 25th now, a man that had a really, really big influence on my life, on my view of God, my view of the Bible, my view of manhood, just spiritual identity in general. He passed away. They're saying a medical emergency. I'm not exactly sure. I know he was facing some serious health issues not long ago, and I'm just assuming or suspecting that it was related in the same space. But he passed away, and when I got the news, I was just in disbelief. And I kind of sat, just like I am right now, kind of just quiet for a good little bit. Because though I would grow to differ from him greatly, I would develop my own disagreements with him, and that doesn't negate like what type of figure he was in my life. In fact, it's ironic that he had been on my mind recently. He's never really quite left my mind. That's how large of a figure he was in my life. But when the Charlie Kirk situation happened, I started looking up what were some of my former teachers saying about Charlie and what happened. And I ended up listening to a sermon from him, which now would be his last sermon. And that was just on Sunday. I was just a week ago. I was just listening to him, not even knowing that this would happen. So the timing for me personally, not to make it about me, though this video is about me and my relationship to him, the timing was just odd. This individual's name, this man's name, was Vody Bacham Jr. And he was not only like a digital teacher. I had the chance, the opportunity to meet him, to kind of get to know him, spend time at his house, had lunch and stuff like that quite a few times, and got to glean from him personally for a couple of months. So I just want to start off by saying my condolences to his family, his wife, and his children. He had 9 of them, 2 biological, 7 adopted. And I can only imagine. I saw a post from his daughter yesterday of just kind of the whirlwind of that. Like, people just saw him as this ferocious voice for Jesus and this powerful man of God who was so smart and educated and dynamic in his speaking. And she was just like, man, that was my daddy. I just miss my daddy. Like, my father is not nearly as big of a name as his father is, but in my local community, my dad was kind of a big deal in the city, and on a smaller level, I can understand just like how people see my dad, and then just to come home and be like, I guess y'all see him that way, but this is just my dad. And so I can only imagine what that feels like, and the sort of the awkwardness and the eeriness of it all. And so my condolences to you, Jasmine. Those of you who are not familiar with Vodi Bakum, if you were familiar with Chase God TV, then you were familiar with Vodi Bakum. Maybe not directly, but you were familiar with Vodi. And I wanted to make this video because this is not the first time I've made a video when significant teachers in my life have passed away, particularly my childhood pastor, Nathaniel Holcomb. And then when R.C. Sproul passed, I think I was still very much Christian and somewhat reformed. Yeah, even when he passed away. And then Tim Keller, I didn't make a video about him. I wasn't really making videos at the time, but he was really influential. But if you watch Chase God TV, if you were influenced by my teachings around the Bible at all, then much of that is indebted to the teachings of Vodi Bakum. Especially early on, it was really just a blend of stuff that I learned from my pastor, my childhood pastor, and Vodi. And I'll just say, when I found myself drawn to Reformed Calvinist teachings, this very intellectual approach to the scriptures, trying to learn more about that world, I found that it was very white. It was very white. I don't know if I had a direct problem with that at the time, but it was just a thing. Like, this is white. And up until this point, I had never had anyone teach me in a deep way about God who wasn't black up until this point in my life. Like, every pastor, even in college, even when I kind of drifted from faith in college and I was kind of going back and forth to church in college, still blackity black spaces. And so this was new for me. And so when I stumbled across a video of Vodi, I was just drawn, not just simply because he was black. I think that helps, but man, it was just this super dynamic, just big dude, man. I don't know, it probably was like 6'4" or something like that, 6'3", 6'4", 2 something, just like big dude with a big voice who spoke so eloquently and so confidently, and when he didn't speak, it was still powerful. Like, if anyone mastered the pregnant pause, it was Vodi Bakum. The mic drop, pin drop moments, Vodi lived in those spaces. He wasn't one to really waste a lot of words. He wasn't a lot of fat in the things that he was saying. It was just, when there wasn't anything to say, he would be silent and begin speaking again. And so I read his books. I don't know how many books I've read from him. A few of them. Went to conferences, listened to hours and hours and hours of podcasts or sermons from him. Hours of it. Watched videos, hours. And so when I had a chance to, meet him in person, it was somewhat of a surreal experience. And so there were teachers that influenced me intellectually. I mean, I can make a list of people that I was listening to at that time: Keller, Washer, Sproul, Begg. I was listening to quite not Begg. What was his name? I forget his name now. I think I'm mixing his last name up with somebody else, but that's besides the point. Listen to a lot of dudes, and none of them had an impact on my life like like what felt personal, like Vody, even before I met him. He lived in my home, you know. It felt like. And so it's also ironic. I had the video. I recorded it. I think I was even wearing this shirt. I recorded a video last week after I was listening to a sermon of him. I even recorded a video talking about him, and I just never posted it. And then like 2 or 3 days later, I get the news that he passed away. And the video, what I was saying in the video was talking about the appeal of fundamentalist Christianity to young men, because I was, as I have been doing for a while, processing like what was so appealing about that space to me. Obviously, I've nailed down the intellectual part of it, like, oh, I wanted a faith that felt more rational and logical. But that wasn't the only thing. And I had to start thinking like, what was so attractive about that? And specifically, the reason why I was thinking about it, I was thinking about Charlie Kirk and what is so attractive about him to young men. Obviously, I think there's a white supremacy component to that, a lot of dog whistle components to that, but not even specifically Charlie Kirk, but just what Charlie Kirk represents, the people that he is a spokesperson for, the ideology that he's a spokesperson for, and even down to like Red Pill Bros and stuff like the podcast bros. What is appealing about that space? And then I had to narrow it down to like conservative Christianity, conservative evangelicalism, Reformed Calvinism, all that. What is so appealing about that? Obviously, I think one side of it, men really love logical stuff, want to be logical, want to dig. Not that women don't, but, you know, just that sort of analytical side of things. But I think also on a surface level for a lot of dudes, like I said, podcast bros, I'm still not really much into that world, but from what I can gather, they offer a voice to the frustrations of young men, even if that voice is not the best one. They do feel like they have a voice that sides with them, that gives them a reason for their excuse. I think that the reason is ill-placed, is misplaced, especially when you get deeper down into it of conservative evangelicalism and conservative politics. They start pointing the finger at immigrants and feminism and stuff. And this video, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but obviously I don't believe that that's really the core problem of young men in America, especially black men in America. And then just people as a whole. I think we think that some people think that immigrants are the reason why jobs and money is not where it's supposed to be. And it's like, okay, y'all gonna go get rid of all the immigrants and find out we still broke and can't afford homes. Then we'll see who the real culprits are. But I get sidetracked. What was also, I think, attractive to me specifically, and I think maybe to others, is especially in a space where either men didn't have fathers growing up, but I had a father growing up. I don't know, even in we had sort of brotherhood ministries and stuff in the church that I had growing up. I don't know if there was a systematic approach to manhood the way that I saw systematic manhood approached by people like Vody Bakum, like very structured, almost, I wouldn't call it militant, but the structure of a military type of thing where it's like, this is what men do. This is how men father. This is how men, and not just in a narrative way, but in a very systematic, structured, this is what you believe about being a dad. This is how a man should lead in his home. This is how you should be studying the word. And this is how you should be catechizing your children. And this is the type of routines you should have. Very systematic. And I think men want that. Men want structure. Boys want structure. They're looking for that. And I think ultimately, many times, toxic masculinity aside, women are looking for men who exude that, who show a sense of routine and rhythm and structure so that they can feel secure, that when life feels chaotic, they feel like this person, this man, presents a sense of stability and certainty in a very uncertain world. And I think this type of systematic and structured approach to manhood from the right, from fundamentalist Christian spaces, really offer that. I don't know of that. So just because I don't know doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm not aware of. I would love to be aware of. I'm not aware of men, especially non-Christian or even progressive Christian spaces, that offer an alternative to that in large scale, where we can see men saying, hey, this is how men should be. This is a systematic approach, not just examples. See, this is a good father over here. Okay, great. Not just examples, but structured ideology behind it. And also a space where cis hetero men are celebrated. You know, sitting right here too, one of my favorite books that I read as a Christian, thankfully, even though this is not a Christian author, this is Bell Hooks, The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity, and Love. I think every man should read this book. This was really transformative to me. I know that she's best known for her book, All About Love, but this was actually my first introduction to her, and really my first introduction to feminism. And going into it as a fundamentalist Christian, I just assumed that, oh, this person's going to be talking about how bad men are and how bad patriarchy is in the world and how men suck. And this is how they can be real soft, they need to be softer and they need to whatever. Like, I just had really strong assumptions about this book. And what surprised me about it were really two things. One, she wasn't coming from this angle of like, oh, women don't need men. She's very much like, no, we need men. We need men, but we need them healed. And not just any kind of man. I haven't read this book in a while, but I believe this is what I'm taking from it, was in it. We need conventional masculinity as well. It's okay to have the wide expression of masculinity. Not every man has to be presenting as a conventional man, but let's not get distracted to the point that we think that conventional masculinity is not something to be championed and something that is good for society. We can say that while also challenging and critiquing a lot of the negative aspects of conventional masculinity, what we call toxic masculinity. But a lot of these things that are toxic come from spaces that could be good. A man that wants to be a provider, the toxic version of that is a man who wants to manipulate based on what he can provide. He wants to control based on the amount of money and power that he has. That is a toxic expression of that. Men who protect, men who have strength, strong men who have strength, express that in negative ways by then using that strength against the vulnerable people in society, children and women and queer people. They use that aggression, that testosterone that is naturally in you, that aggression, then is not. It's now pointed at vulnerable targets, rather than using that strength, that power, that aggression to protect people and to make the world a better place, using that aggression to protect others from people who would like to use their aggression to target the vulnerable. And so I want to continue, especially in this sort of gender war thing that's been going, especially with black men and black women. And I think the answer oftentimes is somewhere in the middle of it. We have all these critiques and we can swing from one extreme to the other. And yes, men need to heal, but it's not that we don't need. And I would think a lot of women would agree with me on this to some degree, especially the women that I know. Like, don't let people fool you. Women still want conventional masculinity. They just don't want to be in the crosshairs of the toxicity that it brings, the abuse and pain that it brings. They want to reap the benefits of conventional masculinity. And I think men want that, and they become misguided by podcast bros and even a lot of fundamentalist Christianity. And so there are still things that I take from someone like a Vodi. I've had to really, really chew that and digest it and figure out what that looks like for me now. And to this day, man, it's like I said, as much of an influence he had on me, like I still every now and then will look at my life and be like, I wonder what Vodi would think about what I'm doing right now. That's how much of a figure he was in my life. I've just had to learn how to redeem a lot of the things that I've learned from him when it comes to how I show up as a father. A lot of what I learned, how I approach being a father, I know that it's Vodi echoing there, and which is not, it's not necessarily a problem for me. I just have to learn how to, like, okay, eat the meat, spit out the bones, and I want to be a father that champions the boyhood, the masculinity of my son. I want my son to be raised in a world where his masculinity is championed the same way that the femininity, and in the broad spectrum of gender expression, can be celebrated in the world. I want him to be celebrated too, but in a way that I don't want to say earned, because I don't think everything should be earned, but also in a way that's also like that justifies that celebration. You know, I want him to be someone who is strong and emotionally aware, mature, and uses that maturity and that strength and that wisdom and that knowledge to better himself and better the people around him, and to protect the people around him in a loving and sacrificial way. And for all the things that I may disagree with Vodi, I'll take that. I want to be fair, because I know I gave Charlie Kirk shit when he passed away. I didn't pull no punches. It's different. I'm not gonna lie. It is different when you actually, I didn't know Charlie. It's a little different when you had a personal connection to someone. And so, you know, I think when I started parting ways with Vodi's thinking was right around the time, I believe, Mike Brown had been killed, and I was looking for these leaders, these reformed leaders that I've been listening to sort of step up and set the record straight about what God thought about little black boys in America. And on more than one or more than several occasions, I was just disappointed to see the stance of Vodi. It was really, people could be angry, but when it's somebody that you like really trusted, even from a distance, and really admired and loved, it's disappointing. You just kind of, you feel like you kind of got left out to dry by the people that you really admired. And I think the last time I saw him speak live was at the G3 conference in Atlanta. And it was like a pre-conference day talking about social justice and all these white men. That was the first time that I saw really white men say the word woke. That was so odd to me. And that was kind of ground zero, because then, like, now obviously the anti-woke sentiment is so popular now, but I was there at ground zero, I feel like, when it wasn't popular, and it was just within small, very, I would argue, fringe Christian spaces. And You had people like James White, Josh Bice, who was, turns out to be even more weird than I thought he was that day. And I challenged him publicly on Twitter. And I saw these white men giving their take on social justice and critical race theory, and just being blown away by how it really wasn't like some really intelligent men speaking, and they weren't really making what I thought were biblical or even just logical refutation. It really just felt like a rally around these virtues of being Reformed and Calvinist. And so Vody was one of the last to speak. And so when he got up, I was just like, oh, please don't let me down, man. And the weird thing was that as he spoke, I could tell that he really wasn't on this, at least at the time, he really wasn't on the same page as these other dudes. Like, he had a much more nuanced approach, and yet still kind of let them off the hook. Like, there was never I don't remember the message. I don't remember the sermon. Maybe I can go look it up later. I just remember what I felt walking away. Like, I just know he was an extremely intelligent dude, extremely intelligent, very smart, very well read. And I was just like, how can you say this in front of these white people? Like, how do you? I was disappointed, man. Like, more than angry or upset or wanting to like rage out, I was just like, damn. So, but I still kept up with him from time to time. Like I said, just had a huge impact on my life. And so I learned a really valuable lesson then, as I've learned many times in my life. You got to own what you believe. Like, even the people that are heroes to you, great men are still men nonetheless, with a whole lot of flaws, a whole lot of inconsistencies. And I don't mean that as a slight to Vody. I think he would agree. Like, we know, like, people from a Christian standpoint, you say they're fallen. I just say, like, man, we're all inconsistent. We all have issues, ill motivations, and sometimes. And I'm sure there can be just a list of critiques of me. And so I want to be honest, but I want to be fair and kind to those who had an impact on me. I'd like people to be kind to me when I inevitably leave this earth one day. So I say this not from a place of like trying to use this as a moment to down Vody, but just to show that personal connection, how like that disappointment came not from someone who watched from a distance and he was just a screen name on an app, but a person that I really respected. And even with all that, man, like, disagree with him or not, a committed husband, a father, I could be disappointed about his stance on social justice and have my thoughts about what he may have thought about little black boys in America, but he was a little black boy and he adopted a bunch of them. So what does that say? Right? We're just complex beings, man. And even with all of that, I'm thankful for the challenge that he offered my life, that made me think deeply about the faith that I said I held. It really challenged me to dig in the scriptures, even if it led me to ultimately leave in the scriptures, at least in any sort of fundamental way. I did it. I did it. I went through it. There was no getting over it. It was getting through it. And Vody played a huge part in me making sense about what Christianity, what Jesus meant to me, what manhood means to me. I had never thought about manhood in that way until I stumbled across a Vody Bakum. And I don't doubt that even as I wrestle with what I agree and what I don't agree with him, I don't doubt that that will be a lingering voice in my life, thinking, okay, you may disagree with me, but what's the reason behind it? And what are you going to do what are you going to do? Now, what are you going to reflect on? What are you going to pontificate about? What are you going to do in response to that? Are you making the most out of your life here on earth? So, yeah, heavy day. That was heavy. And again, my condolences to the family, people that knew him and are hurting. And I hope y'all are able to grieve well, and that people around you that love you, that will walk through this very just odd grief, and you'll be able to continue to make sense of it as life goes on, because life will go on even when it feels like it's come to a screeching halt at the moment. Life will go on, and I hope that the life that goes on for you will be good and will be kind to you. So that's it.